explores topics affecting Wilmington and you, the people who live, work, and visit this wonderful city. I'm your host, John Rago, and on today's program, the issue is developing a new agenda for African Americans. Well, why a new agenda? What does it look like, and what is it intended to accomplish? You know, our guests today all have an interest in helping to craft the new agenda in the local community, and they include Dr. Donald Morton, director of the Complexities of Color Agenda, Keith James, a youth engagement assistant with the United Way of Delaware, and the leader of a group called Voices for the Voiceless, and Kasai Guthrie, who as a local high school student has become a leader of a movement called We Need Our Fathers. Now up front, I want to note this program is being presented to look at some serious issues affecting the health and well-being of African Americans in Wilmington. But I also want to note that this program would not be possible if it were not for people from the community, such as our guests, who are engaged in finding solutions to problems and not necessarily dwelling on the past, but instead looking to the future. So with that, let's just talk a little bit. You all are involved in different organizations, if you will, but all part of this local community. So let me give you a few moments to talk about. First, I think one of the more fascinating new developments on the local scene is the Complexities of Color Coalition. Dr. Morton, what's it all about?
First, thank you for having all of us here to be able to discuss what I believe is, excuse me, one of the most important times in the city of Wilmington. The Complexities of Colors Coalition was really started in October of 2013 when Dr. Mark Lamont Hill came to the University of Delaware along with several other noted scholars to discuss race and its impact on contemporary culture. Okay. And out of that, we knew that we just couldn't have a discussion without having some sense of action that needed to follow that discussion. So we met in 2014 over a period of 4.5 months to kind of find out a comprehensive way to address social decay. What was happening was we saw everyone functioning in silos, right? That everybody had a pet issue that they were dealing with, and almost in the sense that they thought that their one issue would solve the overall universal issue that we had within the city and within the state. So what we did was we came up with what my friend Rick Deadweiler called boiling the ocean. And what I said to him when he suggested that we boil the ocean was when the entire ocean is tainted, you can't just take a cup of water out of the ocean and boil that. You have to boil the entire ocean. And so what we did was we came together over that period, 15 of us, to include individuals that were from the community, leaders, no politicians, because we knew that we would have to at some point address politicians with some of the suggestions that we needed to have. And we came together with this 11-pillar approach to social decay. I'm sure we'll get into that a little later, but it's a comprehensive approach.
Okay, all right. Keith, tell me a little bit about your involvement in the community.
Well, once again, thank you for having us all on the show. Really, what we do as far as United Way is concerned, I'm the youth engagement assistant, and in the community, we just try to engage our youth. We try to find the best practices. We have a list of partners that we work with and community leaders that we go out. One of our things that we champion is the Youth Advisory Council, which is we have about 30 youth that come out once a month, and what they do is they come and sit around our boardroom table and they discuss all the issues that are going on in their community. They're broken up into subgroups, love, power, respect, and knowledge. And so each one has a quote that they have for their group each meeting, and what they do is they break down what does love actually mean. Can you love things that aren't people? Can you love, basketball or track? And they start talking about the things that they love in their community. United Way of Delaware is big on keeping the youth in the center of the room. And we personally believe that if you have a youth build and be hands-on with their future, then they're going to, appreciate it more versus if we have, the generation before us creating stuff for us to take on and then we realize that we don't like it. But if they're part of building it, then they're not going to tear it down.
Well, that's what I've heard you say many, many times is let the young people be part of the process.
Yes.
Bring them into the process. In fact, I've heard you question, why aren't they part of the process?
Yes, sir.
In some forums. Is Voices of the Voiceless, is that still active?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Voices for the Voiceless is just an organization that myself and Marcelo Bradshaw put together to provide advocacy for the community, prevent drug abuse and promote nonviolence. Those three things, were put together based off of, what are the main issues going on in our community. Me personally, I was affected by violence. Me personally, I was affected by drugs. And then I felt like I didn't have a voice, hence Voices for the Voiceless. So once I was able to, connect with myself and build that relationship with God, I was able to find that it's easy to advocate for people if you actually take the time to listen. And that's really what Voices for the Voiceless is doing, just going out and, just talking to people and having that authentic conversation.
Okay. Kasai Guthrie, high school student at Glasgow?
Glasgow High School.
And fascinating. You've got materials out there around the theme of we need our fathers, and you have a fascinating story. It's kind of a long story, but essentially, in a nutshell, your father was not in your life, was in your life, and then it was not what you thought.
Yeah.
Pick it up where having a father in your life not being part of what you thought it would be, and then out of that came we need our fathers.
Well, my father moved back to Philadelphia from Florida. Me being the person I am, I assumed that he was going to be in my life, so I started wondering and thinking about like doing the cliche things, like walking the parks and just doing the things my friends' dads were doing with them. Days passed, I just thought that like, when he came back days passed, I just thought like he was just moving in, he was just getting settled in. But then weeks and months started to pass and he wasn't, doing the things I thought he was. So then I started to go down this tunnel of depression, anxiety, almost to the point where I was being almost suicidal. I had to take it upon myself to reach out my hand and say, this needs a change. I need my father. I need to reestablish a relationship. So what I did, the first step was I forgave him. Many people think, I forgave him for his sake, but I actually forgave him for my sake because I needed to actually get over that and get over the depression. Once I reestablished a relationship with him, it didn't come easy. At first, it was rocky, but now it got to the point where we can talk any day. We can talk about the things that I wanted to talk about. So then the next step was me and my mom talking, and my mom saying that there are kids just like me that don't have a father in the community of Wilmington, in other communities, in other cities and states. So that came, We Need Our Fathers. We Need Our Fathers is basically an organization that I came up with that basically reestablishes relationships and also encourages fathers to be active in their children's life.
Yeah. And you'll have a chance a little later on in the program to talk a little bit more about, I want to give each of you a chance to promote your organizations and how to, if some of our viewers are listening or watching and they want to contact you, we want them to be able to contact you, obviously.
Okay.
All right, so let's go back to Complexities of Color Coalition and a new agenda. I'm going to be honest with you here. I had a chance to run this past some African Americans I work with, and they were somewhat familiar. I think one of them may have seen something in the newspaper about this, but the other said with skepticism. I'm not sure what that's all about or why it's needed. So I guess one of my first questions is, and we'll get into what the pillars are and look, for those who are, have any kind of smarts about them in our local community, we kind of know what some of the issues are. Unemployment, dysfunction in the family, crime. These issues that are affecting the community. But what about the skepticism about, who are you to put together an agenda? You, not you necessarily singular, but you and the others to put together a new agenda. Why a new agenda?
We tend not to pay attention to skeptics. I think oftentimes those that pay attention to skeptics don't get anything done, which is a part of the reason for which we have not seen the kind of advances that we really need to see. And so to that end, though, the reason for which we came together was because we saw, for example, organizations like Kasai's, not Kasai's in particular, but organizations like Kasai's that were doing great work, right? So the agenda is not about new initiatives only. It is also about affirming and sanctioning existing individuals and organizations that are doing great work. And then where there is no overlap, where there exist chasms, then we fill those with new initiatives. And so it is a compilation of new ideas and affirming old ideas as well. So that what we understood was if we were going to make any sense of advance, right, then there had to be a collective voice to do that. We have not seen that kind of advance because everybody's doing their own thing in different parts and pockets of the city. And we're not at all suggesting that that is not great work. What we're suggesting is bring all of that to the table so that all of us can advance at the same time. No one pays attention to individual organizations long. but they do pay attention to a conglomerate of organizations, a collective communal identity, which, by the way, is synonymous with African ideas, right? Chiffon Taylor talks about this dismantling of iconic individualism, the suggestion that Keith is iconic, Kasai is iconic, Donald is iconic. Well, none of us are iconic. All of us coming together are able to make a significant impact in the city. And to whoever the individual is that would be skeptical, all they have to do is look at all of those institutions and organizations that have come on board that have remained autonomous, but still bring their expertise to the table.
Now, you know, it's interesting, if you look back through history, you're absolutely correct as far as how people pay attention to what. They, you know, throughout our history, there have been individual organizations, but it's not until the people organize it. It's not until the masses come together. And it is Black History Month. We recognize the contributions of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, but he organized.
Yes.
He knew that he had to organize people. They had to come together. They had to make take a position, but you know, it had to be a united position.
Absolutely.
And you are absolutely correct in terms. Look, I'm born and raised here in Wilmington, and you are correct. I've seen what happens in the local community. It's easy for everybody to be running in different directions. Now they're all trying to do the same thing and trying to do the same good work, but they think they're all doing it in their own way.
Absolutely.
So you've got a task ahead of you.
Yes.
In terms of how to pull folks together.
Well, they've come together.
Yeah.
And so I think the moment, the crisis of the moment demands a collective, right?
Yeah.
So we've not had the level of challenge that perhaps individuals before me have had, only because we're in a season where the moment demands it.
You opened my eyes to one thing, though, when you were explaining about the Complexities of Color Coalition.
Yes.
Having its origins in 2013,
Yes.
and then formulating in 2014, and now here we are. I thought at first that it came out of something like a Ferguson, but it's much earlier. I mean,
It's much earlier than that. And Ferguson provides us a moment. We hear oftentimes, I've heard Keith talk about it, I'm sure Kasai talks about it, we talk often about moments becoming movements, right? And that's important, but this social decay didn't just happen in 2014.
Right.
It just didn't happen in 2012 when Trayvon Martin was killed. We've been in a downward spiral, to use Kasai's words, for a very long time. And this moment, as a matter of fact, the agenda was complete in 2014. We rolled it out in 2015 because the moment demanded it. And I think what we're seeing is everyone, not everyone, but large amounts of people and organizations, we get emails every single day from people who say, we're on board, educators, philanthropists, economic development individuals from all across the city and state who want to be a part of something that will address what we are seeing. Every pull trigger begins somewhere else. It doesn't begin in that moment. It begins somewhere far before that moment. If we can address the systemic things that feed social decay, then we'll be able to address the things that we're having frustrated.
We're going to take a short break. When we come back, let's get into some of those things that are feeding into the social decay, the tough task ahead, but how in the world do we pull folks together to finally do something? I mean, you know, you all have sat in discussions for many years. I have too. But let's hope that something's going to happen. It's going to be different this time. All right, we'll continue with issues in just a moment.
Oh, those boys are much too much. Those boys are much too much. We got the spirit. We're hot. We can't be stopped. We got the spirit. We're hot. We can't be stopped. We're going to beat them and bust them.
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life.
Let's get a little bit rowdy. R-O-W-D-Y.
Take time to be a dad today. Call or visit fatherhood.gov to learn more.
Okay, Simon, what do people wear?
Clothes.
That's right. So it's important to learn how to dress yourself. Here's how it's done. Shirt, underwear, pants, socks, shoes. Underwear, always first, name tag on the back. Then pants and shirt. Go ahead and put this on. Now with the shirt, you want to make sure the first button's right or you have to start all over again, okay? Socks left on left, right on right. Tying the shoes, we're going to take the laces, we're going to cross them over, we're going to turn around where the bunny goes down in the hole, pull it tight, and bunny ears. Got it?
Most parenting is hard to do in just 2 minutes. But 2 minutes twice a day making sure they brush is easier, and it could help save them from a lifetime of tooth pain.
We continue with issues, and thank you so much for being with us on the program today. Dr. Morton is with us, and Keith James is with us, and Kasai Guthrie, and we're continuing our conversation about a new agenda that has been put together for the African American community locally, and who knows, maybe it might have some resonate some way beyond our borders, because what is happening here locally in Wilmington is not necessarily peculiar to Wilmington. I mean, it is happening around the nation. It's happening in many urban areas. For those of us who grew up here in the Wilmington area, you'll remember what happened in the late 60s and 70s and 80s. We had to go through a period of social unrest and racial unrest and so on and so forth. And there are many people who will tell you that Wilmington really never recovered from that period. So let's now get into, go back to the Complexities of Color Coalition and some of these pillars. Give me some examples, and then we'll get into some other discussion with that.
Well, there are 11 different pillars. Let me begin somewhat in a non-traditional way. Usually I deal with education first because education is a hot button topic. But let me begin with Kasai's movement, right? So one of the pillars of the Complexities of Color is how do we recover the black family? How do we reintroduce fathering to the black family in a way that does not necessarily mean that mom and dad are together. The nuclear family, as existed in times past, doesn't really exist anymore. We have a different dynamic with family. Medea is raising children now. Moms are raising children. And contrary to popular opinion and belief, simply because a single mother is raising a child, we're talking about poverty as an issue more than it is about that single mom. But here's what we do know. Whenever a stabilizing force as a father, which is important, right, is reintroduced to that family and giving him skills and not just how to cope with his son or his daughter, but also how do I engage mom in a healthy kind of way, because it's not really about us, it's about my child, right? And there are countless, I think the narrative has to be recrafted because there are countless fathers who want to be involved. And now we have phenomenal organizations like Kasai's who are bringing that component together. So hopefully, even out of the conversation today, Kasai's organization, We Need Our Fathers, comes to the agenda and brings that component of fathering and young men and young ladies being reintroduced to their fathers.
What are you finding, Kasai, in terms of why fathers hesitate to come back into a family or can't come back into a family, or what's stopping them?
Yeah, what I came to find that was crazy was that mothers actually force fathers out of their children's life. It's kind of absurd to actually think that, but that's what they do because of past arguments and past things.
Do they think the male is a bad influence, so therefore get out of our lives?
I mean, sometimes it could be that, but sometimes it's their personal relationship with the father.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
We have to come together and we have to actually forgive the father, and you guys have to basically make you guys not the mission, but the raising the children the mission.
That's
right.
You learn something every day, don't
right.
you? Yeah. And I guess you don't know these things unless you're involved in these situations.
Yeah.
All right, so you started to mention education, and that's great. And certainly any dysfunction in a family, and again, not necessarily just in the African American community, but that's our discussion today.
Yes.
Go to education for a moment, and don't get me started on some of the what we can say about education. But education, I mean. All right, I'll keep quiet. You go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, let me also say this. I think it's important to recognize that there were 15 to 20 of us that came together.
Yeah.
And this is not a Donald Morton issue.
No, I understand that. Yes.
For example, the education pillar is led by Ray Jones Avery. Because here's what we also found. We also found during research that institutions of learning that are connected not just with the ABCs 1, 2, 3s, but also have a cultural component, have highly successful students that are what the Du Boisian model would call the problem child, right? He's asked, how does it feel to be the problem, right? So we take institutions like Kaumba Academy. Soledad O'Brien did an interview and some research with a school in Minneapolis, Minnesota, that looked at this connection, this intersection between education and cultural relevancy. How do I understand? How do I self-identify? How am I self-aware, right? Because if I'm not able to do that, and I see that in education right now, with schools that shall remain nameless, I can tell you that a young man's first engagement with a black male is not in front of the classroom. It's in discipline. Right? So if I'm going to engage with another black male, I'm not going to see him as a positive role model in front of the classroom. I got to literally get in trouble before I can engage another black male. So there has to be some sense of reculturalizing black spaces. And to the degree that we're successful in doing that, that is not a means by which we compartmentalize or divide ourselves. I believe that we have to have some sense of self-identity and awareness before we can even engage this global society, this broader society. I've got to be clear about who I am, which is the importance of HBCUs. It's the importance of schools like Howard Career Center, which was traditionally the school that blacks could go to. It is also the importance of early childhood education, right? How do I establish in that child from the very beginning a sense of self-identity before they get to these other grade levels that it becomes more and more difficult for them to have that impregnated with them?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because you're moving us toward a desegregated society, which is again what the courts told us many years ago was they sort of dictated to us how it was going to work, and it didn't work. But you're also talking about correcting again patterns that have developed over all these years, and now you're saying African Americans have to work harder at correcting some of these patterns and then move toward integrating and desegregating and so on and so forth. It's very, very interesting. What about education for just a moment? On this whole thing about the public charters versus I call them regular public schools, and the thing that annoys me the most is this, and you too as young people and still a student, you have these young kids in the African American community, and I'm going to test scores now. They're here, if you will, they're here in terms of their achievement level or what they've ever been able to achieve in their lives. They get into a school, let's say it's a charter school. They're now here. And it's the most they've ever accomplished. It's the best they've ever felt about themselves. But you know what? They're not here. And the state tells us and the federal folks tell us, well, you're not here. Well, you know what? Now what they do is they yank the rug out from under them and say you can't have that school, you can't have that setting. That annoys the heck out of me. And I
have to hop on what Dr. Morton says, and I have to also bring in another stuff. I'm a junior in high school at one of probably the worst high school in Delaware, so I get to live and go day in the life of like a student there. But I used to go to private schools, so I'm the best of both worlds, private school and public school. I was transitioned between the both. And the number one thing that annoys me, that I talk about a lot, is environment and self-worth. The students there, they don't see any self-worth, so they come to school every day thinking that they can't do anything. I think we have to install self-worth, and that's why I like to go to Glasgow, because I show the students that you can go to a normal public school, probably the worst quote-unquote public school in Delaware, and still accomplish things in life. So I think first we have to change the environment, and also we have to change the teachers. I come to school, I do not have any African American teachers. There's probably 10 African American teachers in our school, and they're disciplinaries.
Interesting.
So I think we got to change that as well, but also we have to change the environment.
Which, for the non-African Americans watching this program, when you hear someone say, "I need to see someone who is like me," I don't think they get that sometimes of why that is important.
Well, they don't get that because they have that. Right? So it's difficult for anyone to tell me, why is it important for you to have an African American in front of the classroom as a role model, or so on and so forth? Why is it important to have Kasai's and Keiths in our lives? Because you have that. There is a constant stream of positivity connected to the dominant culture that African Americans don't necessarily have, right? So a part of the agenda is the communications pillar run by Chiffon Taylor, which corrects narratives because stereotypical narratives that have been detrimental to African American, Black and brown people. So oftentimes when we see Black and brown people, we're seeing them in such a negative light that it's difficult to crawl out of that hole. And we have to begin to correct that, because the truth is, unless television shows like yours, right, have Kasai and Keith and Donald on, will continue to perpetuate a narrative that suggests Black men are lazy, we're not doing anything, we're killing each other, so on and so forth, which is not the case in broad numbers. It is a very, very small group of individuals committing these kinds of crimes, but they get the majority and the lion's share of the attention.
Absolutely, because that's what sells newspapers, that's what sells the ratings on television. One thing for both of you, I want to engage Kasai and Keith on something. You said something interesting about the students coming to school feeling worthless? Now that's generally, that's just African American students, that's generally.
This is not even
So, okay, if that's the case, if kids are coming to school that way, how do you engage them? What difficulties do you find when you try to reach out to people of your own age or even younger or slightly older to engage in being part of what's happening?
I think it's really just all about having that authentic conversation. When we go and talk, to piggyback off of what Reverend Morton said, when you go into the schools, it's important to see, these figures, as teachers and, around you, because we live in a generation where we have to see things to believe them. And because of the way that we were brought up in the small community that we're in, we can only see as far as these city limits. We have to, show them that there are Black doctors. We have to show them that there are Black lawyers and that there are Black, astronauts, things of that nature, so they can believe that they can achieve it. I think it is very important for the African American community to build that, amongst themselves, and then, be able to see it so they can achieve it. But also, with all races, I think it's important that all races really, just start to have that authentic conversation, not only amongst their race, but with each other. I want to be able to understand different cultures so I can, not, have an opinion on it, but I can understand why you operate that way. So I can understand, your roots, why you do the things that you do. But we're kind of stuck in this way to where we stereotype, certain cultures or certain races, to where we don't really give them the time to have that authentic conversation, and that's what we need in our schools.
We all, it's interesting. Don't we all perform better, feel better if we feel better about ourselves? And that's a great thought. If we could, let me just take a short break, and then we're going to continue the program. So we'll continue with issues in just a moment. You stay with us.
Introducing a new day of the week, someday. Now, everything you were going to do someday is on the calendar. Want to retire someday? You'll really want this. A My Social Security account at socialsecurity.gov. You can estimate your future benefits and manage current benefits online. Millions of people have a My Social Security account. Get yours today, because someday is here at socialsecurity.gov.
We are your Wilmington City Council, and we're also your neighbors. We're asking you to let us know about your community events, achievements, concerns, and issues.
That's why we created a special email address that will connect you to all of us in City Council.
Drop us an email about things going on in your neighborhood with Community Events 22 at wilmingtonde.gov. That's Community Events 22 at wilmingtonde.gov.
And we continue now with issues, and thank you so much for being with us on the program. Just before the break, we were talking a little bit about engaging young people and feeling better about yourself and what you can accomplish from that. Kasai, do you want to pick up on that?
I think in our generation, my peers are attracted to people that are just like them, that grew up the same way they did in poverty, crazy ways. So that's why children, my peers are attracted to like rappers and athletes because they grew up the same way they grew up. So I think if we put teachers and African Americans more like doctors and lawyers and stuff, then they will be attracted to that because they grew up in the same neighborhoods that my peers grew up in.
That's interesting. Can I say it a different way?
Yeah.
So we have young people who are looking at rappers or basketball or athletes.
Yeah.
Okay, so they either want to be like them
Yeah.
or they somehow feel better because of them.
Yeah.
But that's what they have to look up to.
Yeah, because
And
they grew up in the
let's
same.
change the dynamic a little bit.
Yeah.
We have to make, for example, education, right? When you talk about education, you talk about economic development, you talk about the black family, you talk about educated young men like these two brilliant brothers here. We have to somehow make this, and forgive the term, but we have to somehow make it sexy again, right? Because unless it is popular, unless you have a bit of swag, you can't just have education with the nerd-like thing. You got to be able to have education with, like Kasai and Keith have education with a little bit of swag. And then you have to present images and success stories that suggest this connection between the two. Most young men and sisters are looking for a fast way to be successful. And both of these brothers will tell you there is no such thing. And the very small number of people that make it in the music game, and I'm not discounting that because I think that's a part of it. Right. And athletics and so on and so forth, that's important. But the broader populace would have to be educated in order to be successful. And I'm not sure that we've done a good job of connecting the dots.
Yeah, let me ask about social media for just a moment. In either portraying whatever you want to portray to African American young men and women, does social media, does it help or hurt? I would think, I look at social media as just another communication tool.
Yeah.
So therefore it's another way to push out information. Now it's also another way, which I kind of disagree with, I don't think people think half the time before they respond on some of the social media stuff. But does it help? I mean, can you use social media as another tool? Because years ago, let me tell you one more thing about the haves and have-nots and the what they called the digital divide. I used to be very worried here in Wilmington about whether people in the African American community had the new technology. And we used to work with Comcast and other companies to try to make sure that they did, or at least had an opportunity. But then some of the statistics you look at today, I mean, everybody and lots of people in the African American community have these. Yeah. So I would think that would be a help. Would that be a help?
It is absolutely a help, and it's free.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a free means of being able to communicate with the broader society, thoughts and ideas that oftentimes go unheard when you don't have that kind of access to media. Like anything else, though, it is amoral. It really is neither moral nor immoral. It's amoral. It depends on who is utilizing it. Yeah. There is an uprising that took place in Egypt where a bunch of young people did what was necessary to have their voices heard. It began on social media. Yeah. So social media can be done, can be used in ways that are incredibly healthy. At the same time, it can be used in ways that are incredibly unhealthy. It depends on the user.
Right, and it's like everything else, let's try to take that medium, if you will, and turn it around and make it something positive. Sure. All right, let me turn to a topic that's a tough one, and that is the topic of crime. Okay. If there's one thing if I had to pick one thing that confuses many people, causes those stereotypes to be built and populated, if you will, it's crime. And it's crime in terms of what's happening in the African American community. Look, most of us know that most African Americans are law-abiding citizens, and in these what are called pockets of crime, let's use Wilmington, we have people who are committing crime. Now, the statistics would show, anyway, at least in terms of the race of those arrested each year, would show that the majority of the people committing the crimes are African American. So how do you how do you deal with the whole thing of, non-African Americans looking at young African Americans walking down the street and picking up whatever they want to pick up? We just saw the Attorney General is it the Attorney General, I think, of the United States, or no, the FBI Director of the United States just issued a very interesting piece the other day on race and why cops look at African Americans differently. But anyway, I'm talking. You go ahead. Tell me about this whole issue.
You want to go?
You go ahead.
All right. Well, I just want to say some of the ways why people look at African Americans is the media. Media portray African Americans as criminals. Mm-hmm. There's no stories of, well, there is stories, but there's not enough stories that are matching criminal stories as there is positive stories. Mm-hmm. So I think once we change that, then people will start looking at African Americans differently.
Mm-hmm. And I think it goes back to the same thing that we spoke about as far as having them see larger than the city limits. If you are a young man and you're growing up, and whether you live in the city of Wilmington or you live in Claymont, I grew up in Claymont. So when I grew up and I realized that I want that, but we can't afford it, then that's when the thought of what do I see around me come in, where do I go to get this money? If a lot of people saying that these jobs are not hiring, but haven't filled out these applications, won't give it because of everything that they're hearing. So if everybody around you is telling you that there are no jobs hiring in the city, and you see the same people out on the corner every day with the shoes that you like, the cars that you like, they see the things that are put on TV, the women, all of these things, then that's what they'll idolize and that's what they'll go to. But if you had doctors who on their lunch break went out and stood, instead of just walking down the business district, Market Street, but went out and stood on Market Street, over on the north side of Wilmington. And we're talking to the kids who were not in school and telling them that it's not too late. Ben Carson, he had failing grades until fourth grade. And so you can't, and me, I dropped out in 10th grade. You follow what I'm saying? So it's never too late for you to decide to turn around and get your life. And now I'm in college. So I didn't think that it was going to happen for me, but it's just these opportunities that we have to see and we have to provide for the community to see.
If we could use Ben Carson as an example, though, since you throw out Ben Carson's name, Ben Carson also grows up and then forgets where he came from, right? So his narrative has changed, and a part of, and I think it's also important. I think everybody would agree that if white communities were policed in the same way black communities were policed, you'd have a high rate of crime in white communities too. That we're not innately criminal, right? So. For example, we were talking about Delaware State University a couple of days ago, and they said, well, Delaware State University is a party school, right? So several things that happen on Delaware State campus. Well, if you go to UD, then you're going to see crime too. So there is no innate ethos in an African American person to commit crime. Crime is committed where a person lives, and we have to Kasai's point, we got to change the narrative, right? And so that I don't think we think critically. I think we think anecdotally, right? So we're always looking at the media and we think that's truth, and we don't dig deep enough to find out all of the reasons for which some of these things really exist. And I think we have to do that.
Yeah, Keith just said something about essentially to some of the young people, you getting these patterns of this is my life, this is what I do on a regular basis, this is what I think is cool, this is what I aspire to be. But you're saying break out of that a little bit, look around you a little bit, see what else is there, and know that you don't have to accept these limits.
I mean, I think with the youth, we tell them to think outside of the box. If you tell a youth from the city of Wilmington to think outside of the box, it's going to, usually it's going to revolve around the music, or it's going to revolve around the, sports or things of that nature. It's not really in the education. When you tell them that there is no box, rather think outside of the box, there is no box. Life is not a matter of discovery, but creation. They have to understand that. And when we're talking about educating them, we're not just talking about educating them within the schools, educating them on how to treat our women, educating them how to treat themselves. You can't truly love somebody until you love yourself, and you have to do that in an unconditional way, to where no matter what you do, you will take your experiences on and you'll understand that. And that's big on what United Way is doing with the life map. I mean, I talk about the adversities that I went through, but I also talk about the assets that I had in my life, whether I recognized it then at that moment or not. But now I recognize that I have them, and I use those assets, to help me move forward in life. And that's what the youth have to see when they're going through certain situations and they feel that their love that is, being given to them has conditions on it.
Yeah.
My mom doesn't want me in the house because I wanted to get money to help her,
Yeah.
but the way I'm getting money is wrong. So now I'm not going to fix my relationship with my mother. I'm going to keep getting money and then make it on my own.
Yeah.
Versus understanding all of the, these things that brought this problem to life. To Kasai, I mean, when I had problems with my father growing up, I didn't grow up without a father. I always wondered why he wasn't there, and I always wanted to ask him to his face, why wasn't he there? My aunt said to me after, I saw him and it didn't go the way I thought, she said, what could he have said that would have justified him not being there? So at some point in our life, we do have to realize that, yes, that father relationship is a key component, to building, us up as people, but at the same time, that is not, the only thing. We have uncles, I'm sure you have uncles, male role models. It's just because of the way that fathers are portrayed, on TV or how we see them with, others, that's what we think is best for us. But my father not being there still made me the man that I am today, because it helps me understand that I will not treat my kids like that.
Wow.
Or, I will go about that process differently.
Wow.
I still got the same lessons.
Yep, interesting. Arnie, look, let's take another short break. And at this particular break, here's what I want to do. Up on your screen, I want you to see all the information for Keith and for Kasai and for Dr. Morton. In other words, some contact information in case you want to reach them after the program is over today and talk to them a little bit more about their particular, the work they're doing, but the fact that they're all trying to bring it together. That's the most important thing. We'll continue with issues in just a moment.
The Wilmington City Council and WITN Channel 22 are happy to announce the completion of the newly renovated Council Committee Room on the first floor of the Lewis L. Redding City County Building. The state-of-the-art upgrades include a more user-friendly seating arrangement, high-tech soft lighting, vastly improved audio, and large monitors for multimedia presentations. This will foster greater government transparency through increased public participation and improve the quality of WITN's broadcasts. The meetings will continue to be streamed live online at WITN22.org, where you can also find all of the meetings and WITN's other programming in our on-demand archives. Stay tuned for more improvements on the way to the City Council chambers and to WITN studio website and social media platforms. WITN 22, your city, your channel. We're back now on issues. Thanks so much for being with us, and my many thanks to Dr. Morton for being with us today, and Keith James, and also Kasai Guthrie. Let's continue the discussion now, and I want to turn back to the agenda, and let's talk more about what are some of the other pillars. What are some of the other solutions, or we're trying to get to solutions on things.
Well, we have, as a part of the agenda, we talked about education. We talk about economic development. We talk about making sure that there is not just a minimum wage raise, but a livable wage, which can be very, very different. Two very, very different things. And fighting right now with fast food workers who are finding it very, very difficult to raise families on the amounts of money that they're making. I heard Steve Harvey, which is usually my dude. Steve Harvey's usually my dude. But this one particular time, he said something that just irritated me because he said, I think the fast food workers were fighting for $15 an hour, something like that. And he said that you don't get $15 an hour for flipping a burger. And I said, you don't get $15 an hour for talking on a talk show, right? So there has to be value.
Who puts the worth on what's
right? Who places the worth on what a person does? So economic development. Charles Madden, who really oversees the criminal justice pillar of the agenda, called me a couple of weeks ago, and he said, I found out that the dealers aren't making a boatload of money. these guys aren't millionaires on the block. They're not making a boatload of money. So if you can somehow find a way to give them meaningful wages, right, they'll leave the block. So that's one of the pillars. Spiritual and cultural awareness. If we think about it, one of the great things about the agenda when we were crafting it is we had not just Christians at the table, but we had Muslims at the table. Not just Muslims, but we had Buddhists at the table. Everybody laid down distinct differences to come together and say, we've got a moral problem. The black church in particular has a responsibility to return to its social ethic, right? It used to be the epicenter, the cornerstone of black life, and it has since moved from that space because of this idea of prosperity and things of that nature. But I think it's returning, and we've sent out to the churches and mosques a covenant that we ask them to sign to say that we are more about the collective communal identity and advancement than we are about our individual responsibilities, right? And we're getting those feedbacks back now.
Well, let me ask you a question about in the area of religion. I would say to you, and I get your response on this, I would say to you that I would think that African Americans who have religion or church in their lives are, again, those similar African Americans that I said before were law-abiding citizens. So isn't it a problem, again, of reaching the folks who are out doing the bad things and the crime and anything else that they shouldn't be doing? How do you reach them?
Well, I think religion can be, it shouldn't be, but it can be a very relative context, right? The way in which I engage God, I would suggest to you may be very, very different than the way Keith does or Kasai does. I know Kasai's mother, and so I know she loves God, right? And I think we have to be able to allow for individual expressions of that relationship with God. To use your statistic though, what you will find is statistically individuals that come into relationship with God even while incarcerated are less likely to return to that, right? When they develop a very strong relationship with someone higher than themselves, whether they call him God, Jehovah, Buddha, whoever they call him, right? I'm a card-carrying Christian. I love me some Jesus.
I found God.
I found God.
Right.
They are less likely to return to that kind of activity. So that, along with culture, we just met with the city recently about how do we create black artistic spaces, because a part of what we're attempting to do is change STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, to STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts and math.
Beautiful.
Because that's a part of this overall comprehensive approach that we have to be able to address. So there are 11 different, everything from those things to gender relations. Why is it okay for us on this panel, which by the way, I want to recognize that it's all men on this panel, and there was supposed to be another sister.
Yeah, we did invite. We're trying to mix it up a little bit, and the female panelist was not able to make it because this got rescheduled because of the snow.
Right. So I wanted to bring that to bear because we have one pillar called gender relations. How do we make sure that as men we make 100%, but a sister makes 70% of the 100% we make? That's problematic. Why are they not at the table? Why are they not CEOs in ways that we have access? So those are the kinds of social decay elements that we attempt to address. And then one of the ones that nobody likes to address, I will tell you that it was the hardest fought pillar in those meetings, and that is international affairs. Because everybody said, well, we got enough problems in Wilmington to worry about Africa or other spaces. But the truth is, to that exposure piece, right? Unless we're willing to expose young black men to other spaces, then they'll have this view of their lives that is really, really not accurate. And until we're, Africa is not just a little baby with flies and a snotty nose. That's not Africa.
No.
Africa has great trade possibility, business possibility that is untapped, and a part of what we hope to work with. And we've met with Senator Coons' office about how do we trade with Africa, how can we do business with Africa. So the agenda is not just about Wilmington, not just about Delaware, but we recognize a global society.
Wow.
And to add to that, I mean, just 3 quick points that I heard as Dr. Morton was speaking. When we talk about, reaching out to the young people who need to find that relationship with God, I believe that, it's part of, the 40 developmental assets the Search Institute founded. The more assets you have prevalent in life, the more you are likely to be successful, the more likely you are to live a healthier lifestyle, and the least likely you are to engage in risky behavior. And one of those was, a strong religious, background, or, a religious community. And I think with our young people, as I said, multiple times on the show already, we need to see things to believe it. And a lot of times when we're talking about religion, we go through experience that doesn't match up with the word. And so if it doesn't match up with the word, we disregard of the experience, but own the word. And so we don't take from that experience, good, bad, or indifferent, what we have learned from it a lot of the times. And we look for God only in the book, but we don't look for God everywhere around us. Yeah. So that was one of the things I wanted to touch on, the women part. I mean, I believe that, the women are, coming together with coalitions just like we are coming together with coalitions, because they are empowered. They want to empower each other. So for Donald Morton to, bring the, African-American community together to empower them, that is an important step in the overall problem that we have. Michelle Taylor is the CEO of United Way of Delaware, an excellent and phenomenal woman. Absolutely. Who I've been trying to get on her schedule. I'm like, I need to have that meeting with you, not about United Way, but just I want to learn from you, because the passion that she has for this community is amazing. Absolutely. And the last thing I wanted to touch on, when we talk about, the youth in this city, and we talk about, really finding a solution, it's all of these little steps that are going to take us there. We want this just one giant big step of change, but we're not acknowledging the baby steps that come in between. So it's going to have to be, those uncomfortable conversations when we're talking about race, when we're talking about education, when we're talking about how we treat our women, how we treat ourselves, how, the things that we put into our body. It's not going to, change overnight, because it didn't get this way overnight. I was talking to Reverend Morton. I texted him my thoughts all the time, and I, text him. I said, can we really just say it's, Black Lives Matter versus all lives matter? And that conversation pretty much was around just, it can't just be a black thing, because we need to all realize that we are all one with each other. So, and then, he gave me his thoughts, and that conversation, just allowed me to think bigger. It wasn't to say that he was wrong or I was wrong. It wasn't that type of conversation, but allow me to think bigger. If I believe this, tell me your thoughts to challenge mine, to where I will be able to back mine more, so I will be able to believe in what I'm saying, versus now I'm going to drop my thought and just go with yours. So I think it's very important that we, just acknowledge the success that Wilmington has. I mean, and even if that brings, people to see what Murdertown, USA looks like. I mean, that obviously hurt our community. Right. But with Voices for the Voiceless on that end, and interacting outside of our country, we're working with Operation Help the People, which is in Jamaica, where they're going to be feeding 5,000 people. And this is started from a young man who I met at Del Tech. So so they're going to be doing that in Jamaica, and then we're going to be coming here in Wilmington and addressing the violence and drug abuse. All
right. Well, listen, we're coming down toward the end of the program. Well, let me go back almost to the beginning where I started with a little bit of skepticism. But I got to tell you, after listening to the three of you speak, and again, I'm going to give you, and I don't mean to keep saying this, as a non-African American who's lived in this community, has interacted in the community, some of the stuff you're saying is like very refreshing. It's different. You're going to encounter, though, those who are entrenched. What are you going to do? Because I'd hate like heck to see this not move forward. But you're going to have folks out there who are just of another mindset.
Sure. You learn in leadership to go with the goers, right? And there have been, even what we talk about King, and there are a couple of points that I want to make. I think today's conversation is refreshing for us, John, for a couple of reasons. One is we see in whose hands we're leaving this state. Right. Look at the brilliance of these two brothers, so that if I, God forbid, died tomorrow, these are the leaders that we lead, that we leave the movement in their hands. Secondly, you have to learn that Dr. King was the voice of the movement, but he didn't organize the movement.
Yes.
There were everyday people, by Rushton and others, that organized the movement to give King a platform to be able to have a voice. And so I want to celebrate these brothers, the institutions and organizations that they represent, and countless other organizations that are doing phenomenal work. And if we'll all come together, there's a significant impact, because politically, that's one of the other pillars that I have to get in, and that is we are looking now not just to ask the question whether or not you're voting. It's not just voter registration, voter education, but it's also crafting candidates. Because a part of the problem is people are not voting because they ain't got nobody they want to vote for.
That's right.
So let's find out who we can run next. And if the people in Dover, City Council, Newcastle County, statewide office are not doing the bidding of African American people, for my context, then we're going to find somebody to do the bidding.
Right.
And that means you leave office.
Let me give you a thought on that.
Yes.
Urge people to vote for a reason.
Yes.
Have
Yes.
a reason.
Yes.
Why you, okay?
Yes.
All right. Listen, thanks so much. I really
you.
appreciate you
Thank
being
you.
here,
We
Dr.
appreciate
Morton and Kasai and Keith. This has been a great discussion. Thank you all for being with us on issues. Again, you have information there available to you in this program. You can contact these individuals and they can, talk to you more about what's happening. It's exciting. I believe it's very exciting. That's all the time we have on today's program, and many thanks again to our guests. If you have any thoughts or discussions, you can tweet them at WITN22, WILM, #issues22, or you can post your comments on this video's YouTube page. So for WITN22 and Wilmington City Council, I'm John Rago, and thanks so much for being with us.